April 17, 1975. In the city of Phnom Penh, the clocks didn't just stop. They were murdered. 2 million people evacuated at gunpoint in 24 hours. No bags, no goodbyes, no destination. The world saw a revolution, but underneath the black pajamas, something far more sinister was happening. This wasn't politics. This was a clinical surgery on the human soul. Welcome to Year Zero. I am your host. Today, we peel back the skin of history to find the neurons of a monster. This is the psychology of ideological extremism. To understand the killing fields, we must start in the most civilized place on Earth, Paris. Meet Salazar, a failed radio technology student, a man who loved French poetry and failed his exams. He wasn't a born butcher. He was an intellectual seeking a cure for his nation's perceived sickness. Here is the first reversal. The most radical anti-intellectual movement in history was designed by frustrated intellectuals. They suffered from what psychologists call the golem effect, the belief that people are fundamentally clay to be molded. For years, Cambodia was the collateral damage of the Cold War. B-52 bombers dropped more tonnage here than on Japan in WUWI. Trauma is the soil of extremism. When a society is shattered, it seeks a total explanation. Pol Pot offered that explanation. He didn't promise a better life. He promised a pure life. The Khmer Rouge's first move was the Great Reset. They called it Mahalaut Flow, the Grand Leap. They believed that to create the new man, they had to kill the old man, not just the person, but the memory. Money was abolished. Markets were blown up. The very concept of value was reset to zero. Why did they kill people for wearing glasses? It wasn't because they hated vision. Glasses symbolized hidden knowledge. In a world of total equality, a person who reads is a person who can hide thoughts. This brings us to our first psychological deep dive: cognitive dissonance on a national scale. When reality hunger, failure didn't match the ideology utopia. The ideology didn't change. Reality was punished for being wrong. The Khmer Rouge practiced groupthink taken to its terminal conclusion. They called the leadership Ankar, the organization. Ankar was everywhere, yet nowhere. It was a god without a face. In psychology, this is the panopticon effect. If you don't know who is watching, you watch yourself. Children were taught that Ankar was their true mother and father. The biological family was a reactionary institution. Pol Pot viewed Cambodia as a body with a cancer. The cancer was the city, the educated, the individual. He wasn't being cruel in his own mind. He was being sanitary. This is the second reversal. The Khmer Rouge didn't want to be evil. They wanted to be perfect. This is the terminal stage of utilitarianism. If the general will requires 1 million deaths to achieve paradise, the math says do it. Pol Pot was deeply influenced by Sartre's concept of bad faith, the idea that we are what we do, not what we say. To Pol Pot, if you were a doctor, you were contaminated by the old system. You couldn't just change your job. You had to be discarded. Now, let's look at the narcissism of small differences. Why did they kill their own comrades most of all? The more similar you are to your enemy, the more you must differentiate yourself through violence to prove your purity. They changed the language. they removed the word I. You were no longer a person. You were a mitkameradit. This is the psychological erasure of the self. If there is no I, there is no suffering. There is only the state. Every night lifestyle meetings. You had to confess your private thoughts. This is interrogative self-monitoring. When you are forced to lie about your loyalty, your brain eventually believes the lie to survive. S21. The Institute of Purity. Out of 20,000 people who entered, only 7 survived. Look at their eyes. This isn't fear. It's the 1,000-yard stare of people whose reality has been deleted. The Khmer Rouge kept meticulous records of their torture. Why? Because an ideology requires proof. If the system is failing, they needed confessions to prove it was sabotage and not a flaw in the theory. This is the sunk cost fallacy of revolutions. The more blood you spill, the more you must spill to justify the previous deaths. Pol Pot lived a Spartan life. He didn't want palaces. He didn't want gold. He was a true believer, and that is much more dangerous than a greedy dictator. Remember the robbers' cave experiment by Muzaffar Sharif? It showed how easily humans create in groups and out groups. The Khmer Rouge took this to the extreme. The base people, peasants, Ves, the new people, Arbonites. One slogan was, to keep you is no benefit, to destroy you is no loss. That is the definition of dehumanization. When a human being is reduced to a unit of labor or a biological risk. No music, no love song, no laughter. The soundtrack of Cambodia was the sound of shovels and the voice of Angkar. This is sensory deprivation as a social tool. When you remove all culture, the only thing left to fill the void is the state. They believed they could bypass centuries of development through sheer willpower. In psychology, we call this omnipotent grandiosity, the belief that the laws of nature and economics don't apply to the cause. The Great Leap failed. Famine set in. People began to eat the bark of trees. Under the purity of the regime, the most basic human instincts, hunger and survival, became crimes. When a population is starving, the brain enters survival mode. You cannot revolt when you cannot think past your next meal. By 1978, the paranoia reached the very top. Pol Pot began to suspect everyone. This is the Othello syndrome of dictators. When you have no enemies left, you must invent them to keep the machine running. He began purging his own inner circle. The purity was never pure enough. Ideological extremism is a cannibal. It always, eventually, eats itself. In 1979, the Vietnamese invaded. The invincible Angkar collapsed in weeks. The man who reset time fled back into the trees. Years later, he was asked if he felt guilty. His answer, "My conscience is clear." This is the most terrifying psychological fact. Moral decoupling. He truly believed he was a patriot. He had decoupled his actions from his morality through the lens of the greater good. 1/4 of the population was gone. 1.7 to 2 million lives. Nature tries to hide the scars, but the psyche of a nation doesn't heal that fast. This is intergenerational trauma. The year zero left a void that still echoes in the DNA of the survivors. Is it over? Or is year zero a software bug in the human mind that can be reinstalled? Today, we see the same psychological patterns, the US vs. them, the cancellation of the past, the purity tests. Extremism doesn't start with a gun. It starts with an idea that is too good for people to disagree with. Remember the Ash experiment. Most people will deny their own eyes to fit in with the group. The ghost of Pol Pot isn't in Cambodia. He's in the impulse to delete what we don't like. Time cannot be murdered, but it can be wasted in the pursuit of a perfect world. The lesson of year zero is this: beware of anyone who offers you a new beginning at the cost of yourself. History is a mirror. If you don't like what you see, don't break the mirror, fix the face. Because when the anchor of your time comes calling, your only defense is your eye. Pol Pot tried to reset society. He only succeeded in resetting the definition of horror. Don't be a unit, don't be a comrade, be a human. If you found this deep dive valuable, subscribe. We have more ghosts to interrogate. This is Psyche of Power. Stay sharp, stay human. See you in the next void.